situation with the petrodollar deal not being renewed that I feel is really, it warrants more coverage, or whatever you want to talk about it. I mean, yes, of course, it's been in the news the last 6 days or so since Saudi Arabia indicated that they weren't going to renew it, and then 2 days ago when the deal actually expired and they announced that they were confirming that they're not renewing the deal. This really has global implications on so many levels. You know, if you're a supporter of the dollar or against it, if you hate the U.S. dollar because of its political policies and foreign affairs, or its domestic issues, whatever your side is on any political issue, or any economic issue, or frankly cultural issue, this affects you, right? If you don't like the spread of democracy around the world, if you prefer authoritarianism and dictatorships around the world, this affects you either way, right? Personally, I like democracies. I prefer them to authoritarian dictatorships. And we are seeing, unfortunately, a current reversal of a lot of countries switching back towards more authoritarian regimes. We've seen that happen over the last couple of decades, actually. In the 90s, it seemed to be going the other way. We're seeing more democracies. And then since about 2005, 2010, we're seeing it flip back towards more authoritarian countries. And, it's a constant swing back and forth between countries that earn their freedom and countries that lose it. And so this is a massive shift. The implications have not even really sunk in to most people, because most people aren't even aware of it. Yes, people who read financial news, etc., certainly know that this has happened, but even most of those people aren't necessarily aware of the full implications, and they might think this isn't a big deal, that we might see the Petro BRICS happening more and more, and it might not be that big a deal, because anyway, Saudi Arabia was only importing, Saudi Arabia was only exporting to the U.S. about 6% of what the U.S. imports in terms of oil. And of course, other countries still use the dollar, so it's not that big a deal. But it is a big deal because that deal guaranteed that every other country used dollars for their oil transactions. And you might say, well, it's not a big deal because BRICS already was attacking that by not honoring that deal since a number of years. Between Russia and China, they were already doing some deals in yuan and rubles, and you might say, well, other countries are also likely to be doing some deals in non-US currency. If not already, then they're going to be doing that very soon. But again, it's not going to be a major disaster for the US, because the US is now the #1 exporter of oil because of all the oil exploration that's been happening in the US in recent years, because of shale oil and other sources. So now the US is actually the world's largest producer of oil, and it's not OPEC, which many people still would think is the US is the largest producing group. No, it's not. It's actually the US. It's not a single OPEC country. The US actually exports more than any OPEC country. Produces more and exports more than. So you might have all those arguments, for why this is not a big deal. But you'd be overlooking the very fact that the petrodollar has also kept the world in a fairly static condition in terms of geopolitics, right? Related to the obvious, first and foremost, fact that the U.S. military is the superpower in the world, right? It's the superpower military in the world, by far. But think of how quickly that can be evaporated in terms of its status, and how much less of a superpower it could be, or even flipped from being a superpower to not a superpower, and to not being the dominant military if suddenly China were to become that superpower, because it suddenly became the currency of choice for oil deals. Considering China is the largest importer of Saudi oil, right, in the world, more than the US now since a number of years. Considering more and more countries want to do business with China, despite their terrible economic condition, which was brought on by their own greed, really, with their overdevelopment of real estate, right? And despite the fact that China outlawed mining of Bitcoin in 2021 or so, which made Bitcoin switch from being a mostly clean-powered commodity to not mostly clean-powered. Right? When Chinese miners were mining, the majority of Bitcoin was actually mined with clean energy for a number of years. And then once they turned them off, and all the miners moved out of China, the Bitcoin miners moved out of China, we turned back to dirty fossil coal and gas and oil to mine Bitcoin. So this has massive implications, and like I said, we'll be talking about it for sure more on the Alpha Trading live stream later today. So tune in at alphatradinghq.com/discord, or go to the Alpha Trading Rumble channel. That's it. Talk to you later. Happy Bitcoin